I'm Greg Nelson. I'm a human at Southgate.
Tell me about you a little bit. Tell me your background a little bit. I'm just curious.
Oh dear. Well, I'm a retired, semi-retired social studies teacher, history and geography, and a few other things.
Where'd you teach at?
Um, well, I did my student teaching at Northeast and East High School, and my first teaching job was 11,000 miles away in Australia.
Oh, wow.
So I had to get on a plane and go to Australia for my first teaching job, and it was pretty scary. Kind of like this morning, not knowing what to expect. But
what led you there?
I was there. I taught in Australia about 3 years.
Okay.
And actually, I had been in Australia before when I was a kid.
Okay.
My dad was a Fulbright exchange teacher, and we lived in Sydney. And I was 9 and 10 at that time and liked Australia a lot. Of course, when you're that age, you don't worry about where you're going to live, how much you're going to get paid, how are you going to get around, stuff like that. So those are all things I had to deal with when I went back to Australia to teach.
Mm-hmm.
And because I have a background in history and geography, it gave me an excuse to travel.
Right.
So that's what I did. And then I taught, after I came back from Australia, then I taught at Northeast High School and Pound Junior High and Southeast Community College, Lincoln campuses, and also in Beatrice. And I taught at Doane College, Lincoln campus.
Okay.
And then most recently I've been teaching online with the Scouts.
Oh, yeah.
Some citizenship classes and things like that.
Have you been involved with Scouts like your whole life?
Pretty much, yeah. It helps to have your dad as a Scoutmaster for many years. And he encouraged me to do whatever we wanted to do. I wasn't originally going to be a teacher. I wanted to be an architect or an astronaut. I never did get past the A's in the job listing. But yeah, my dad was a scout leader in Alliance for many years, so I knew Scouts through him, and decided to continue with it here at Southgate and other places that I'd lived. I actually started a Scout troop in Australia.
Oh, wow.
A bunch of people. And that was fun.
Why was that? Why was it so important? What do you enjoy so much about that?
Well, Scouting has got a lot of good precepts I think people can live by. The Scout Law, for example, if you follow 8 out of 10 or 8 out of 12 Scout laws, you're doing pretty good. And I don't follow them all, but I try to keep them in mind when I'm dealing with other people and challenges that I deal with in my life. So I think Scouting has been a good for me and for a lot of other people in trying to focus on the good in the community and protect what is good and try to build on that if we can. And I'll talk about the 12th point of the Scout Law, which is a Scout is reverent. That's been an important part of my life, to try to be reverent in church and other aspects of my life.
Yeah. Cool. How did you become a Christian? First question.
Well, having grown up in my family, there have been generations of people who have expressed their Christianity in various ways. Myself, my sister and I, we were baptized in the church in Alliance, and we went through 8th grade confirmation, and we were both active in church in Alliance through the MYF and other groups. So I became a Christian through profession of faith in the Methodist Church in Alliance.
Mm-hmm. Cool. So faith was a big part of your life growing up, family life?
Well, nobody labeled it as faith. They said, oh, you're doing faith. You're not doing faith. But through action, my parents and grandparents and so on have always been active in the community, and they've expressed their faith in different ways, through helping other people mostly, trying to be good citizens and so on. My grandfather, when he was studying at Dana College in Blair, he had a book on civil government, And I'm sure he read through that quite carefully. He was a young man when he came from Denmark. He was a teenager, actually. And he was 5 years off the boat from Denmark. My grandfather had a college degree.
Wow.
I don't think a lot of people can say that.
No kidding.
Yeah.
No kidding. Oh.
So anyway, does that answer the first part of the faith?
Yeah. So do you remember saying yes to Christ at a specific time, or is that something that grew over time? Or do you feel like your profession came when you were at the end of that time, end of 8th grade, Is that where you felt like you felt your faith, or did it drop? Did it change?
I think it helped to have been part of a community where other kids of my age, we were 8th graders at the time, we all expressed an interest in being good Christians, I think. And we just had good parents. I think we had good models to follow, which helped us to do well in the community. We weren't always A or B students, but we tried to do good, pretty much. I guess I should also mention some of my family past, if I could, about coming to America and how important faith was for early people in the family. Thomas, a young man named Thomas, came from Germany, and he arrived in Philadelphia in 1697, Thursday afternoon about 4, I think it was. And he'd fallen in love with a young Quaker woman on the boat over from Germany, and they later married and lived in Pennsylvania. And from their family, then we got another Thomas who later served in the American Revolution. And of course, you have to, if you're a veteran, if you're a military person, then you have to have faith not only in yourself and God, but also in your mission, trying to do well. So early on in our family history, we had people who were expressing their faith in being good citizens in the community and fighting for the independence of the country. And later on, after the Revolutionary War, Thomas come along, then we have Jabez Franklin and his wife Elizabeth, and they're the people who lived in Iowa.
Yeah.
And when they were in their 20s and 30s, they decided to homestead in Nebraska. So Jabez bought the book that he used to help him figure out where to live in Nebraska, and they homesteaded in Howard County. And to have done that, was pretty impressive, I think. And they were both of them were school teachers and so on. So I'm a 4th generation school teacher,
Wow.
thanks to Jabez and other people who came along later. And so after Jabez and his wife were in Franklin County, then they moved to Chapel, and that's where my mother was born. Jabez was in state government. He was in the legislature, and he later became mayor of Chapel. And after my mother was born, and her little brother Mervyn, then my mom got involved in music, and she went to Wesleyan and was a music student at Wesleyan for a while. And through her love of music, then I think I took an interest in that as well. And so my parents, after they got married in 42, then they moved from Chapel to Alliance, and that's when my dad got involved with Scouts. And my mom was involved with WSCS, which became United Methodist Women.
Okay.
And I have a certificate as a member of WSCS because I went to all the meetings with my mother. I was about so high. So I'm a member of the women's group, and still got to proudly pay off my membership so I can become current. Anyway, so my parents were very active, as I said, in church, and they expressed their faith through their church service in various committees, and my dad, of course, in Scouts, encouraged me to continue in Scouts as well. So we have a long tradition in our family of exhibiting our faith, maybe not mentioning it by name, but through example. Mm-hmm. And that's been key to try to live a good life. So that brings me kind of up to myself and my sister, and she lives here in town. She's been active in her church and comes to Southgate occasionally too for services. So that's it.
How did you start coming to Southgate?
Well, after Linda and I were married in '79, then we were looking for a smaller size family-oriented church, and her sister Jeannie and her husband John had decided to come to Southgate, and they recommended Southgate. So it was really through Linda's sister and her husband that encouraged us to come to Southgate, and we've been here ever since.
What about it keeps you coming back?
The families, the people, the great leadership we have here at Southgate. We have some great leaders, and I've always enjoyed speaking with the pastors and other people in the ad council and so on. And we don't have kids of our own, but we like to see the kids come through and grow up and see how they become good adults. So it's been fun to see how the generations have grown through Southgate. I've enjoyed being here and participating in various activities, mostly through Scouts.
How has your faith, your Christian faith, helped you in your life?
Well, it's helped me to define some of my actions and behavior, I think. Just trying to be a good Christian. It's not easy some days to be a good Christian. I'm not a really good example of that, but I keep trying. So I'd like to say that my faith has helped me to focus my life in certain directions. One in the direction of scouting, and the other in maybe environmental awareness, which I think we'll talk about.
So tell me more about that. What are you involved with?
Well, environmental awareness has been in the back of my mind for years. My grandmother, the woman whose descendants came from Germany and Pennsylvania, she bought me the National Wildlife Magazine, National Wildlife Federation magazine, and National Geographic. So she encouraged me to be interested in the environment and travel and other people's cultures and stuff. So I blame that on her. But I think my interest in the environment has been long-term in terms of being able to look at how our activities, our family activities, have impacted on the land and vice versa. Having had farmers in the family, we know the impact of weather and climate and so on crops and how that influences people's decisions to stay on the land or move into town or something like that. So environmental, I've been interested in stopping the pipeline, the Keystone XL pipeline, and I became active in that. I think that's probably one of the challenges is to become active in an organization. You don't know any of those people, but you take an interest in their goals or their methods. So I became interested in stopping the KXL pipeline after talking to people who were interested in doing that, and met a lot of wonderful people, particularly some wonderful Native Americans who have changed me inside maybe directly than most people in terms of their Native American culture and their faith in all things living and not living. They've got spirits within the land, within the water, within the animals. And so the Native American religion has helped me to focus a little bit more on the love of the land and trying to protect it. So we went off to D.C. in April of 2014 for the Reject and Protect activities. It was a week-long session in D.C., mostly on the mall between the Capitol and Lincoln Memorial. And we had our Indian teepees up and workshops for people who came by. And we learned about the environment, and we learned about how to protect our soil and our water. We had a lot of people from Nebraska were there. We had a musician, a flute player from Nebraska, Chris Sayer. He was there, and we had a family from West Africa who I'd never met before, and they were talking about being displaced by an oil company that took over the part of their land in West Africa and forced them to flee. And the person said, "Well, where did you go?" And the young woman said, "Well, I moved to Lincoln, Nebraska." I go, "What?" And so she became a student in Lincoln, Nebraska, and her family, I think they still live here, because Lincoln, of course, is a welcoming community. So we got involved in political activity to a large extent, trying to convince the President Obama to stop the pipeline. And one of the challenges I had as pipeline fighter was to deal with people who had different viewpoints than mine. So we, many of the Nebraska delegation went up to Congress to talk to the 5 people from Congress and try to convince them to stop the pipeline, protect our land and our soil and our water, and they wouldn't talk to any of us. And we were very unhappy about that, because a lot of the Nebraska people had voted for those folks, but they wouldn't even take the time to talk to them in their office. And not only that, but these people were more interested in protecting an international corporation to come into Nebraska and take our land from us, from farmers and ranchers, 3rd and 4th generation Nebraska farmers, to put in a pipeline that had no economic value for Nebraska. But the Nebraska delegation were silent on that. They spoke nothing in our favor, and that was very disappointing. So that's when we got more involved in rallies and letter writing and writing of books and writing of poetry and baking of bread and pies and so on. And we sent thousands of pens to President Obama, encouraged him to sign off and stop the treaty. And we got involved with the State Department activities, hearings here in Nebraska, and lots of other things were involved. There were some important people who came on board too, Hollywood movie stars and a few people with money, but it wasn't so much the money. It was mostly the people who were actively involved in trying to protect the land and the water. We had a concert up in Antelope County, Harvest of Hope, and Neil Young and Willie Nelson showed up for that. That was pretty cool. And sold some T-shirts, some hats and stuff. So we were able to finally convince President Obama to stop the pipeline. And of course, we're very, very happy about that. And so I think through our faith, especially the Native Americans, in demonstrating their undying love of the land, that's what encouraged, I think, a lot of us to continue with the fight. Because we knew the Native Americans, they were here for forever, and they had ownership before any of the rest of us got off the boat. So we could hardly say no to that.
Describe a time when you felt God nudging you out of your comfort zone. Was that a lot of that
That's
case?
part of it. To be out of my comfort zone is to take a stand, a political stand, or a environmental or emotional stand against people you think are not on the right page as far as the environment is concerned, trying to protect the land. And that's what really encouraged a lot of us to use our faith more actively and try to do what is best for not only ourselves, but 7 generations down the road, which is the Native American expression. Make a decision that's going to impact on the next 7 generations. So that's what we've been trying to do, is to think about not only is it going to impact us, but people who we'll never meet, people we'll never know. How is it going to impact them? Which is why when I think about Jabez Franklin Frederick and his wife, they will be the 7th generation of people that I've known in a more direct manner. And we shall see how the next generation deals with important issues, environmental and political issues. So the story is not yet written. It's not yet complete.
Yeah, no doubt. And do you pull back on your history thoughts when it comes to that, your teaching?
Well, yeah, I do. I think maybe to have done some research on my family history, and I credit C.W. Frederick for the family history. He's the one who did the hard work long before the internet to find out who came over from Germany and where and when. I don't know where he got his information, but it seems to be pretty accurate as near as I can tell.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody even has a relative here at this church who's active interested in genealogy and has given me some good advice on that. So history, I think, is useful to try to pull together some facts, and it's helped me to prepare a little bit for this discussion to know that our family history goes back quite a ways, and we've demonstrated our faith in various ways, mostly through our actions and speaking and teaching Bible study as my grandmother did, and so on, and my mom. So I think that faith has been an important part of my life, but I never really thought about it all that much until recently.
Did you ever have doubts about what you were taught about God and the Bible?
No, not really. I think the big concern I've had is that, like during the Civil War, the northern soldiers and the southern soldiers were both praying to the same God for safety and salvation and hope that their cause would win. And God was getting a lot of conflicting messages. I don't know how God sorts that all out. Mm-hmm. Maybe there's a committee that works with him. I don't know. But when you're on a committee, sometimes you have to reach a decision. And so because of the war, the way the Civil War ended, then people should have thought that maybe everybody now has more equality and people have a right to live and to be free and not to be criticized for the color of their skin or how they worship, for example. So I think going back to the Civil War again, people have been very sad in not following God's tenet to try to work with people and compromise when you have to, or reach some kind of a consensus. Because they could have, I think the quote that I was going to read was that people before the Civil War could have maybe resolved this matter without fighting, but nobody wanted to do that. They were closed-minded. So I think we need to think about other people's viewpoints, walk in their shoes once in a while, and try to look at it from their viewpoint, and try to reach some kind of a solution that is fair for everybody. And that's very hard to do these days.
Mm-hmm. Have you ever felt the Holy Spirit calling you to do something big? I feel like that's a definite yes.
Well, I think my the big project I'm working on is trying to help young people get through scouting and become productive citizens. I teach the citizenship classes, and that's been fun to see how they pick up on that, and also to involve myself in environmental awareness and try to make people aware that we only have one planet. We don't have a planet B, and so we need to work together to try to protect the planet for ourselves and for future generations. And those are the two things that keep me busy these days.
How did you deal with there had to be a lot of ups and downs during that whole, but not that it's over, right? It's probably never going to really be over, but how did you deal with the ups and downs during all that battle?
Well, again, we depended a lot on the Native Americans who had seen this before. They knew what it was like to be downtrodden by the dominant society. So we oftentimes turn to the Native Americans, especially the grandmothers. You want to have a Native American grandmother on your side, not the other side, because they will win. Mm-hmm. They know how to fight. Mm-hmm. So we had highs and lows. fighting the pipeline and so on. But we just kept at it, and we knew that, if it's something worth fighting for, you're going to have to make some sacrifices, time and money and sweat and blood and so on. And as you said, it's not over yet, but we continue to do what we can to try to protect the environment for the next 7 generations. Mm-hmm. And people we don't know, maybe someday they'll look back and say, those people knew what they were doing. They were trying to protect it for us, and maybe they'll appreciate us a little bit. And if that's true, then I'll be happy.
Yeah. So what do you feel like, what is your story? What's your why, and has that why changed over time?
My why?
Yeah.
Why am I involved?
Just in your life, like what do you feel like your why? Like, do you feel like your why is different than when you were 16 as opposed to you are now, or?
Well, I think having lived a bit and traveled has opened up my why to explain a little bit more about other people's viewpoints and some of the challenges that they face. And I've learned so much from involved with the Native Americans and people of other religions. I communicate by text with a young woman from Iran that's now living in New York. She was a student of mine at Raymond Central. And then I communicate with other people in various parts of the world, mostly Australia, and to get their perspective on life and challenges, and then to try to adapt that to the Nebraska case. That's been interesting and challenging for me sometimes. So part of the why is, why not? Why not get involved, and why not try to learn from your neighbors and people? You can learn from people you don't like. You can learn a lot from them and find out why they're different, why they're so adamant in their viewpoint. And so we can learn from people we don't know or don't like, and maybe we can reach some kind of common ground in between. At least I hope so.
I know. Seems like it's been a battle to find common ground lately, right?
Yes, it has. Yeah.
Definitely. Anything else you wanted to add or talk about?
I think that covers most of it. Yeah, I've been lucky to have been interested in travel and history, and it's informed me about other people's lives and their culture, and that includes their faith. And I'm happy to have visited a lot of Methodist churches. A few years ago, it was 2018, I believe. Linda and I were in Philadelphia to visit some friends of ours. He's in the Philadelphia Symphony Orchestra. He's only one of the top 5 clarinetists in the world. And his wife grew up here in Lincoln. And so on Sunday morning, we were trying to figure out where should we go to church. And I have this small portable device in my pocket, and I asked the small portable electronic device, where's a good place to go to church, Methodist church? And they sent us off on a wild goose chase. So we got the Uber for the first time, and the Uber went this way and that way, and pretty soon we ended up at this old church under a bridge. It was a bridge that crosses from Philadelphia into New Jersey. And it looked like a pretty nice old church, and we went in and talked to some people, and it turned out it was the first United Methodist Church in the country.
Oh, wow.
So just by accident, we went to church, St. George's, I think it is, met the pastor. He's the first non-white pastor in a church in 240 years.
Wow.
They finally got around to hiring a guy from the Philippines. And he's a fundraiser. He knows how to help churches pay their bills. So we had a wonderful time talking to the pastor at the church after the service, and it was a small group of people, by the way, about 2 busloads, two minivan loads of people. and there was a double baptism, which is why there were more people in church. Linda and I, we increased the size of the church population. Anyway, after the service, then he said, "Would you like me to give you the tour?" And we said, "Sure." So, among other things, we saw the chalice that this guy named John Wesley gave to the church.
Wow.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah.
That was insured for $1 million.
Yeah.
And we learned about the rift between the white Methodist and the black Methodist. And it was during that time at that church when the members of the church leadership decided that the black members of the church should sit in the back of the church. And then after a while, they decided the black members of the church should sit upstairs in the balcony. And after that, the black members of the church got up and walked out and formed their own church. The African Episcopal Church, I think it is. And we drove by that too. So little things like, where are we going to go to church on Sunday, may produce a story.